Welcome back to the Health 3.0 podcast, where the innovators shaping the future of healthcare share insights that you need to take control of your health today. Today, I interviewed Dr. Lisa Koche. Dr. Koche is, I think, a leader in the space of what I would call integrative medicine, but not integrative like they just added nutrition therapy to their medical program. No, Dr. Koche has a new center that's opening that is really pushing the boundaries on what we can offer patients. What she and I speak about today is finding intuition in medical care, finding spirituality in your own healthcare, taking power back for yourself as you're making decisions around how to treat your body, around how to treat your mind, around how to prevent or potentially treat disease. So, this is a really interesting and I'll say kind of out there conversation around the power of mitochondria, the power of spirituality, the power of intuition, and what the future of healthcare looks like as we start to bring these things back, which have been absent from our healthcare system for the past 150 years. Welcome to Health 3.0. I'm Dr. Doug Lucas, and I've spent my career working inside a healthcare system that too often waits until you're sick before it pays attention. We're moving past that. We're ready for a new system. We need Health 3.0. This show is for men and women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are starting to feel those midlife shifts, that fatigue that creeps in, the weight that's harder to manage. This show is for people who want to take control of their health now. Each week, I'm either going to bring you a solo episode where I break down the latest in prevention and performance, or a conversation with a guest, an expert who is shaping what it means to live longer, stronger, and healthier. So if you're ready to move past sick care, if you want to know what Health 3.0 looks like in your own life, you're in the right place. Well, Dr. Lisa Koche, thank you so much for joining me on the Health 3.0 podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we were just talking before we hit record, and it sounds like we have some exciting things to talk about that are going to take us down some pretty interesting and unique pathways. So to set the stage for this, we were talking as we were walking up here about the power of intuition,
Yes.
the power of listening to your body, listening to, we'll call it mind, brain. I'm sure we'll get to that. As far as what's right for you as an individual when it comes to healthcare decision making. And this is totally unique in the healthcare system right now, which is very algorithmic, very guideline driven. And the doctor-patient relationship has really changed over the last, certainly 5 years, and honestly, the last couple of decades before that. So how did you get to this point where you're actually creating a whole new practice around this? You are writing books around this. How did you get here?
I think it's probably my own intuition leading me. So I started at the age of 15, whereas most people in this space get sick down the line, right? They're in their job and then they're getting disenchanted. I was gifted with childhood leukemia. I can say that
Hmm.
now. The time didn't feel like a gift. So I felt fine, went for a camp physical. They found leukemia. I had to spend 3 years in high school and then it relapsed in my ovary in college, right when all my hair had grown back. And I had to go back through chemo again. So I had 5 full years of chemotherapy. And, I had this innate knowing. I still somehow graduated on time, got into a really good medical school because I realized I kept asking my doctors, like, why did I get this? I was just a healthy kid. I went to a camp physical and there was no answer. It was just blank face, right? So I was always interested in the sciences anyway. And when they couldn't answer me, I said, well, I guess I'm going to go to med school and figure it out myself. So despite having heart failure from chemotherapy, in addition to all the other fun things that 5 years of chemo can cause, I graduated on time, went to a great medical school, found out quickly there that when I asked why we were doing certain things for patients that were coming in, nobody had answers there either. And I had this innate knowing. So my intuition kicked in at 15 where I knew I was going to be okay. Like, there was not even 1 second that I was scared that I was gonna get really ill. And I also knew that I had a purpose. Like, there was something that I was being taught in this moment. I had no idea what it was. I had traditional parents. My dad's a mathematician, my mom was a writer. Like, they just had a sick kid, so I was doing the best medical care. I was at Sloan Kettering when it relapsed in New York, here in New York. Um, and when I went through med school, I was able to just really witness the how big the gap was.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, you went through med school, but right now you're opening a large, I don't know how many square feet. How many
It's
was it?
8,000 square feet.
8,000
Yeah.
square feet. So a large, will you still call it integrative?
Yeah,
Since that is a relatively
for
broad
sure.
term, but a large integrative practice. It's called Spectral Wellness. Tell us a little bit about that practice because I think it's going to set the stage for how you're treating patients and how most people are not getting this kind of care.
So, honestly, most of it was also led by my own body. So, this is again the gift of getting the illness young, right? So, I knew not to just believe what I was told from the beginning because the answers weren't coming.
Yeah.
So, I was kind of always open to outside of the box ideas. And what happened was I came across a naturopath very early in my career, a naturopath doing muscle testing, which, is very debatable still.
Yes.
And this was probably 20 years ago. I felt I had a little bit of a relapse in my symptoms. I was already studying integrative medicine and nutrition, and functional medicine was just starting to become a thing. And after I had my daughter, which nobody knew if I could get pregnant, I got Hashimoto's and psoriasis and all these problems. I went through the traditional path again, got no answers. At the time, my friend said, "Listen, there's this guy in Clearwater. He's a guru. I think you should go see him." And I didn't care at that point. I was open. So he pulls on my arm, and I had just gone through ENT, endocrine, all the different specialists for all the different symptoms I was having. And he literally sat me across the table from him when he was done and said, "How are you functioning?" And that was the first time. Everybody else told me that I was fine.
Yeah.
My labs were normal, I was fine, and I knew, so I just started crying, and then I was like, "Oh my god, this guy sees how I feel on the inside." And so I started, working with him, and then we've been side by side for about 15 years, so whenever I'd get an idea, let's say, about thyroid, I said, I feel like the synthroid's not converting," then he would say, "Well, let's go find the enzyme and muscle test it." So he to me knew more than any doctor I'd come across, and I learned some basic muscle testing just through osmosis from him, so I've been doing that for a long time. But that's kind of the core is the 2 of us, and then we've brought in people, like I brought in an upper cervical chiropractor because that I found to be a huge piece of the puzzle. And in this new facility, one of my sisters, both my sisters are therapists, but one is in town with me. She brought her team, so we have mental health. So we have mental health, muscle testing, upper cervical chiro, plus a big performance lab because as I've healed my own body, I've needed different types of hacks, and I've been fascinated with the mitochondria from day one
Yeah.
as well.
Well, I do want to talk about mitochondria because there's a lot to talk about, and it sounds like you've studied that a lot. Can we talk about muscle testing for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
So you brought it up and you said it. So I'm going to talk about it. So my background, I'm a DO.
Yeah.
I'm a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon by training. When I was introduced to muscle testing, I thought that is some of the biggest load of crap I've
Yeah,
ever seen.
for sure.
Um, but my wife she has a PhD in nutrition. We were talking about that. But on her side of the family, we have, I don't even know how many chiropractors. So 12 or 14, or
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
it's a lot, right? And so obviously I've been exposed to their way of practice, and some of them practice like really solid traditional musculoskeletal medicine. Some of them are more in the energy space or using things like muscle testing and some other tools. Some of them are just gone absolutely rogue, as some chiropractors do. Um, but I have to say that when I've seen providers who are using muscle testing, who also seem very intuitive, and it's going to bring us back to this intuition piece. I wonder at this point, is the muscle testing actually like as a tool, is muscle testing doing what we think it's doing, which is guiding us, or is it really just an intuitive practitioner who's using it as a tool that is it's a way for them to bring forward their intuitive nature? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I would say first off, you nailed it. If the practitioner is not open and relatively intuitive, I think the accuracy is definitely less.
Hmm.
It's also harder to commune with the patient when you're like that. So I think there's a necessary level of intuition slash connection really needed between the patient and the practitioner for it
Hmm.
to be accurate. I think we will eventually find science proving that it really does give us information. But I think, like you said, the accuracy heightens with the intuition of the practitioner.
Yeah.
That's how I would answer that.
Yeah, my wife's working with a practitioner right now, and I just like I would love to not believe it, but every time it's spot on, and
It
I
is spot on.
and I just can't explain it
I know, and
any
I
other way.
think
Yeah,
I think when I usually tell patients, "Don't trust me, go try this at home." And then when I explain it as, a reflex and we don't understand it yet, I talk about these principles of truth, so I can share those if you'd like, but the first principle is something may be true, but it's blocked by an agenda. So we saw a lot of that in during COVID times. Like, your intuition might tell you something's true. Principle number two is your intuition might tell you something's true, but it's blocked by your own personal fears or cultural conditioning. And a lot of times, we stand behind, we'll just repeat things because we think we're supposed to. And then principle number three, which is where I put muscle testing, is something may be true, but has not yet been proven. And how many things in medicine did we not know, 30 years ago? And when you see that, yes, the intuition of the practitioner influences the outcome of it, um, I think this whole field is evolving, and I think we're going to find some actual truth as we move forward.
I agree. One of the challenges I have, and this actually ties in, you mentioned your first quote unquote functional provider, right? One of the challenges I have, because I technically am a functional provider as well, and I'm using quotes for those people that are listening to this, because I struggle with the word functional because it doesn't really have a meaning. And a functional provider doesn't have any specific credentials or training or anything like that. And so I struggle because there are functional everything out there right now, functional doctors who are doctors in whatever, who can provide some kind of care, but it doesn't necessarily what somebody needs. And yet then we have some amazing providers. Like it sounds like you found somebody who's right for you, which is awesome. But the challenge I see is when I look at the globe, I mean, if we just talk about our country, how many people need the type of care that you get? It's everybody, right? There are not enough providers to be able to do this. And so you're very fortunate to have found this person. And so my challenge with all of this, and I talked to my wife about this too. She's very into the energy side of this, is how do we, when somebody asks us, how did you make it through this thing? How did you survive this event, right? This cancer, this whatever. And if you happen to find somebody that was perfect for that, but then where do you steer people? And I get asked all the time because I'm not seeing patients right now. I'm in a hiatus of patient care. People say, well, I would love to work with you. I can't. Okay, well, who do I go see? And
Have
I don't
somebody.
have anywhere to send them.
So I feel that as well. One of my goals is to narrow down. So I found, even working with the naturopath, that about 80% of people respond to, you know, a good amount, a pretty basic protocol that we offer. So if I can train, which is one of my goals, is to train NPs, and it may be very basic muscle testing potentially, just like on what support they need for their adrenals or their mitochondria, just so they get faster responses because I see that and then patient gets more bought in. But truthfully, the muscle testing doesn't even have to be taught. Like if we can hit 80% of people, and then unfortunately the 20 are going to have to find a more
Sure.
evolved practitioner.
Right. Yeah. And I sort of live in that 80-20 world right now too, which is the standard of care right now is so poor that actually, if we can 80-20 our way to a lot of these things, we're going to help
We're golden.
a lot of people for sure. And right, but right now it is the 20%. You're right. And these are the people that they say, well, I need this high level of care. Where do I go? And I shrug my shoulders and say, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, so my hope is that we kind of get this system that we've got going on right now, which is a 4-phase system, and we can bring it to the masses. I mean, I really want to start an academy where we train potentially lower level practitioners just so we have a broader reach.
Yeah, sure.
And then the tougher cases are going to be stuck finding more seasoned functional docs.
Right. Right. And so can we talk about what that process is though? Like what are these four?
So it's 4 pillars that we move patients through. So the first one I call reclaim. Most people don't have control over their nervous system. We've learned in the past 5 years a lot about the mitochondria and the cell danger response, which I'm fascinated by. So, reclaiming control over our nervous system, getting that backup system, which involves your adrenals, your hormones, your thyroid, like all of that. People are dialing into one of those, and it's
Yeah.
so much bigger than that. So, reclaiming yourself intuitively and nervous system wise, getting some basic backup support, then we can first go into healing. So, many people will just start with detailed lab testing, and I think that's going into the weeds too soon, but as once we get them sort of stable, supported, then we look for some of the, gut repair, infections, toxins. And then eventually, once I get those two kind of buckets stabilized, we go into optimize where that's people right now are using hormesis and they're biohacking and taking all these peptides. And it's like, you have not calmed your nervous system down, you
Yeah.
don't have backup, you haven't healed your gut, like, they're trying to shortcut everything, and that does not last. So then we go move through optimize. Once we do that, where we start getting mitochondrial biogenesis or the formation of new mitochondria, then we can go into transcend, which is my favorite area. That's more of the quantum understanding where your intuition comes in, and that's really principle 3. We don't understand this yet. But you've got people like Joe Dispenza growing back thyroid glands. I mean, there's something to this, and I feel like most humans can access at least some portion of it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have you repeat that last part. So I've been to a Joe Dispenza retreat,
Yeah,
and I
same.
have drank the Kool-Aid, and I like the Kool-Aid. But you just said that Joe Dispenza had somebody who grew back a thyroid gland. So can you expand on that just a little
Yeah,
bit?
well, I mean, he talks about his own journey where he fractured his spine in multiple places, was able to heal it. And then he talks about through deep meditation, accessing different planes of existence, going into a different quantum timeline that he was able to have a person grow back her thyroid. And he has pictures to show it, which is pretty wild. Like,
Hmm.
it's just like you in the muscle testing. Like, I don't want to believe this. But, people are getting up out of wheelchairs at his events pretty
Yeah,
regularly.
yeah,
So to me, and you'll appreciate this too. Playing with this new mitochondrial test that's out there called Me Screen. I don't know if you've heard about it
I
yet.
haven't.
So I've been waiting about my whole career basically for an ability to test the mitochondria. I've asked my naturopath for at least 15 years, and he was like, I can't muscle test the mitochondria. But I had chemo-induced heart failure, so I've been focused on the mitochondria since I was 20.
Yeah,
My uncle at the time was a podiatrist. He didn't really understand this space, and he sent me carnitine and CoQ10 on auto ship. I didn't know what I was taking because we were not really in the supplement world back then, but I just kept taking it and I got better.
awesome.
So so a couple of years ago, I was at a conference and there was a scientist talking about a mitochondrial test. And I said, "Oh my God, I've been waiting for you for like 20 years. Let's go." So it's a dried blood analysis, pretty easy for people to send in. The funniest part of the whole thing really is that the scientist in San Diego is Joe Dispenza's scientist. It's the same guy. So he's now doing deep testing because I believe this transcend intuitive, healing in the quantum has to do with our mitochondria.
Do you remember his name off the top of your
Yeah,
head?
it's Hummel Patel. Yeah. So I work with Hummel a lot and I'm joining the advisory board with them now because I've been waiting for this test, like I said, for so long. So the funny part of the story is, and I haven't even told Hummel this yet, is most patients, you get a score between 0 and 100. Most people that I do are like 20 to 45. We've had a couple 60s sprinkled in that are athletes. The one test that came back over 80, one person, is one of my best friends who is a blind 65-year-old energy healer. Okay, this woman is not a biohacker,
Yeah,
and she crushed this test, so I'm like, "Wow, if we're finally picking up on energy, like, this could be
right.
exciting."
It's the energy. I want to get more into mitochondria, and I want to talk to you offline about Himmel. But can we go back to this reclaim concept?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to get into mitochondria in a minute, but I see a lot of people. Well, I'll take a step back. When I first started I left orthopedics and I started integrative, functional, whatever you want to call it, medicine. And my practice was called optimal human health. It was this idea like we need to optimize, we need to focus on kind of the foundational things and then build up and use all the cool tech and tools and
Yes.
peptides and all that stuff. As I went through the practice over the course of years, I backed away from the cool tech, the fancy tests, all the functional testing, because I realized that just if you were to look at your 4 pillars here, I was starting at pillar 3.
Most
And
people.
and it worked for some people.
Yeah.
And like myself, and this is exactly what I needed because my foundation was pretty solid. But what I started seeing is I had sicker and sicker people coming to me, and where we were starting was not the right starting point.
Absolutely nailed it. So I
Yeah.
think, figuring out where to start people involves just deeper questioning, and most people, even the healthy foundations, have not reclaimed their nervous
Yeah.
system.
So how do you reclaim your nervous system?
Well, I would recommend a couple different ways. So this plugs right into mitochondria, actually. So the mitochondria, turns out, are very dynamic, and if they're stressed, they form the shape of a meatball, and if they're more relaxed, they turn into spaghetti, and they talk to each other and share resources. It's beautiful. You can see this under electron microscopy. But what happens is, if a patient doesn't get the all clear, then their stress response of the meatball doesn't respond. And so then the cell membrane becomes impermeable. Like, all these peptides people are paying for, stem cells, are not going to work.
Yeah.
So how you reclaim is, you've got to figure out what's going on in your nervous system. And I have various tools I do with patients, but one of my favorites is a device called the Apollo. I don't know if you've played with
Yeah.
that.
Seen it.
So that's just nice because you can be actually existing and doing your own thing and treating your nervous system
And it's a
without.
it's a vibration
It's
device,
a
right? Yeah.
vibrational device
Mhm.
that you wear on your wrist or your ankle. You only need to wear it about an hour a day. But what I love about this device is, my friend, he's now a friend because I reached out to him and he actually called me back, which was pretty crazy. But he's not just a guy making a gadget. He's a bench researcher out of Pittsburgh. So he's got about 20 clinical studies
Mhm.
showing how he helped veterans with PTSD.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like, even patients that aren't that bad, I've seen dramatic turnarounds. If I treat them with some type of vagal tone stimulator,
Mhm.
plus his is an indirect vagal tone, and I like it because you can function and still
It's
wear it.
easy. Yeah.
It's easy, so people are fine with it. And I get them to commit to 90 days, and I've seen dramatic turnarounds. But I mean, also just getting people outside for about 10 minutes first thing in the morning, trying to let them be aware of how addicted to their phone, and just like, the matrix is pretty strong. And a lot of the people that are really into, optimize, they're just sucked right in.
Yeah.
So I think getting them to realize, like, you may be missing the highest level of function because you can't get into transcend. We can't get you there if we can't get your nervous system calmed down. And then giving them the tools that they need.
Yeah. So the Apollo, I've played with it, and I think this is one of the tools I probably didn't give it. I didn't give it enough time. Number one, and number two, I'm not the right person to test it
Right.
because I'm pretty like I don't want to say I'm stress free. That's definitely not true. But I feel pretty good about the way that I maintain it. And so I think for me, I didn't notice anything.
Sure.
But my patient population probably would benefit from it.
They will, because
Yeah.
I'll tell you one funny story. There's one lady that me and my naturopath have been seeing for, like, a long time, at least 10 years. And she keeps coming back even though we can only get her about 20% better. And that's unusual. Usually we're at least hitting the 60, 70. Like, this woman was not improving. And so I look at my schedule one day and I'm like, oh God, she's coming in. What am I going to offer? Because I don't like people to pay me if I can't give
Sure.
them something to do.
Yeah.
So she walks in, she's like skipping into my office. And then I start asking her how she's doing, and she's telling me how all these things that are better. And I was like, well, what do you think made this change? And she picks up her shirt and she has the Apollo on her wrist.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, you found the Apollo. And she laughed at me and she's like, your office recommended it. I didn't even know. I guess she'd called the office.
Found it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She'd called the office and they got her an Apollo. And by the time I saw her, she was responding to everything we'd done. Like, if you can get people to commit to an hour a day for a 90-day minimum, which really is not hard. I mean,
No.
almost every patient is willing to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. With that device, it's very easy. Yeah, for sure. What do you think about some of the other stimulators on the market? We don't need to name any brands if we don't
Yeah.
want to, but
No, it's okay.
because a lot of them will sit around like
Yeah.
the neck, or they'll sit, up on the head.
Personally, I don't like the direct ones as much. I feel like they're almost more causing the opposite response.
Mm,
So I think it really depends on the patient. Like, some people like the direct ones that you wear and stimulate your vagal nerve directly, and
yeah.
you only need it for 15 minutes versus wearing the other one for about an hour, but
Yeah.
it's like dedicated time. And they don't have the level of science that this other device has. So
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
like to go where there's science
For sure.
when I can.
That's funny with our
Yeah.
topics here. Um, I have one coming to my house. I don't remember the name of the brand, but for me, it's interesting though. For me to quote unquote feel it or notice a difference, it is going to have to be more like a hammer
Yeah.
because I'm not that intuitive. Like there's a reason why like I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I just hit stuff with hammer. Like that's just in the space that I'm in. But at the same time, I also was trained in craniosacral therapy. And like, I think that all of those things are real and my hands can sense it. So I just probably need to be open to it.
Yeah.
I want to shift them back to mitochondria. I am super excited if there's a test for mitochondrial health or density. What is it actually testing? Do you know?
So it's looking at they actually when you do the blood spot, they bring the mitochondria back in the lab and then they stress it with reactive oxygen species. They're stressing it with different there's about 6 different things they look at. So they're looking at glycolysis versus ketosis. I mean, really very, very intricate. And I think it's like anything, it's the first in the market. Is it going to shift potentially? But it's a dynamic test. So when you get a baseline and then it would be really interesting for you to do and then you repeat it 4 months later like they've actually got it broken down to you need lipid support, your membrane's impermeable, or you need mitophagy, you have too many dead cells around, or you need to really work on your nervous system, which is
Yeah.
interesting. So I haven't quite figured out exactly the details of how they're recommending all of that. I
Yeah.
think it's a work in progress, but it's exciting.
Well, and this is my problem with any of the topics around mitochondria is that I think, yes, clearly, obviously, they're important and they play such a big role. Energy production. They seem to be responsive to inputs that we either can or can't sense, um, but we can't measure it. And without a biomarker, I don't know. Like all of the actually in prep for this talk, I had a list of like all of these different mitochondrial support
Yeah.
supplements. I think I had 30 on there.
Right, and it's
What do
I
we do?
well,
Yeah,
I used to say it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall,
totally.
right? Like, you're just trying all these stuff, and I would still say that sometimes even now today, you'll see somebody respond to NAD like it's the greatest thing that was ever happened to them, and then the next patient has no response at all.
Right.
So, my goal and hope is that as the testing gets more detailed, we're gonna be able to guide people so they're not wasting so much money and time on all the 30 supplements that are
Yeah.
out there.
I mean, some of them are good for other things too. I mean, like you mentioned, what CoQ10, right? So CoQ10 is a valuable tool
Yep.
in a lot of ways. What was the other one you said?
Carnitine.
Carnitine, right? So carnitine, there's benefit for carnitine in other places too. And then it's also so hard with supplements to eliminate the placebo effect.
100%. And I think, if you know that somebody's mitochondria are suffering because of too much ROS, like, should we be giving them antioxidants instead? They don't need direct mitochondrial repair.
Right.
Or is it the mitochondria suffering because of mold exposure? Like, you have to be able to have somebody guide you, and just taking everything is never the right idea.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest thing about this space is that it's difficult for people to consume enough information and then have enough data about themselves to be able to then apply it. I really hope that in the future we're going to be able to use AI initiatives to help people to steer themselves. Because going back to what we were saying about finding the right functional medicine provider, even if you were to train an army, because right now at LifeMD, I think we have maybe 90, I don't know, 90 or 100 nurse practitioners that are seeing patients. We have an army and we're still barely scratching the surface.
I
And
agree. It's a bigger problem.
yeah, because when I started creating this pathway, and it eventually became very focused on osteoporosis, because that's sort of like for me, it's a really fun space to practice this type of medicine in because we can actually measure it. We can see when bones are getting stronger. We can see when the osteoclast and blast are working. They tell us a story. Love that. But when we would start going down these pathways and you start running into the reality of understanding, like, oh, we need to start looking at mold. You have elevated inflammatory markers. We don't know why. We need to start looking for environmental toxins. We need to start looking at heavy metals. And when you start going down these rabbit holes, it gets very time consuming, very expensive. Um, and a lot of times I feel like the tests are overly sensitive and then you start potentially unnecessarily treating and it just gets real murky real fast.
I 100% agree. So I've always felt that these tests were a little bit in the weeds for people because patients don't understand it. Doctors barely understand them. Let's get real.
Right.
And where the muscle testing has helped, that's where the muscle testing's
Yeah.
really helped
Yeah.
because I can avoid a bunch of tests. Like I can go ahead and treat the gut, hit 85% of people, and I don't have to test anything. And so then we test them maybe after the 6 weeks of doing the basic healing modalities that seem to work for everybody. So I completely agree there.
If there was a way to, I would love a way to quantify, to measure the output of muscle testing or some kind of energy. There's a couple of different ways out there. Because what I've seen with the providers that we have found to be effective for us, because I am a data person, I would say, great, let's do this, but let's also test it.
I love it.
And potentially not even tell the provider, right? Because I can do the testing. I will say that they again 100% of the time have been right.
Before, when I first met my my naturopath, my dad is a mathematician, my husband's a tax attorney. They both were like, "You cannot do this. You went
Numbers.
to Emory Medical School. Like, what are you doing? You're gonna
Right.
sell vitamins and you're gonna ruin your reputation and all those things." But this was,
Uh-huh.
almost 20 years ago, and I felt so bad, and I had gotten helped so dramatically that I just didn't care what they were saying. But
Yeah.
it's definitely a different mindset than the surgeon that's data driven. And the best is going to be a partnership where we figure out how to bring in the data where maybe the intuitive person's leading with, I think we should check this.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to
It's
do.
definitely a blend, and I think I don't believe in coincidences, and my wife has gone down this pathway of being a very energetic, natural, feminine healer as that is her natural state. And so she is drawn to this type of provider, whereas, I came from my father was a surgeon, I'm a surgeon. Like we have this very like hard steel, like show me the numbers, show me the data. Uh, but I think there's a reason why we're together. Right.
Oh,
And so
100%.
I'm open to it, and I love what I see in it. I wish as somebody who is in the space of building it, I'm like, how do I build it?
How do we
Right.
quantize
Because
slash?
because I think as I look at how to treat, the country, we go back to like what's broken in the country. And it is this gap between what the conventional system does well, because it does do some things well,
Absolutely.
versus what people are looking for, which is not that. Like it's good that we can, if you have a heart attack, you can get a stent in under 60 minutes. Amazing. If you were in a bad car crash, you can be in the trauma bay, in the OR in under an hour,
Yeah.
like life-saving stuff. That's amazing. But people aren't looking for that. They're
No,
glad they have it.
people, yeah,
What they're
people just want
looking
to know how to
for,
feel
yeah,
better.
what they're looking for is like, I don't feel very good. I know that I could have better energy. I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my spouse. I want to be able to think straight. My God. So they're looking for the things that you and I are talking about. But then when I look at how to do that, how to build that at scale, it becomes very challenging with the tools that we currently have access to. If there were a way to train and reliably use these tools like muscle testing, this is for, I mean, you have to have somebody to do it, but it's essentially free. You don't need a test. You don't need a tool. You don't
Correct.
need any kind of instrumentation. You just need to trust your intuition.
Yeah.
So that brings me to intuition.
Yeah.
So you have a book coming out. It's called The Unwritten Prescription. What does that mean?
So the unwritten prescription is the fact that with our traditional system the way it is, as patients, you've basically been forced to leave your sovereignty, your intuition at the door, right? We have to just do whatever the person in the white coat says. And I did that and it helped me when I was 15. And then I became a doctor myself to try to figure out the answers, realizing that the white coat does not give you the knowledge as to what's actually going on. And when I had to go back, I think when I had to go back and see all those practitioners again, I had a crazy experience where I was having a lot of thyroid eye problems. And I went to a thyroid eye specialist and I'd studied a lot about T3 protocols and different things. So I go in, I ask him questions. He wanted nothing, he didn't want to hear anything about what I had to say. He just wanted to operate on my eyes. And when I left, I think the nurse had a button under the desk because he came running out of another exam room when I didn't schedule my surgery. What's the issue? We talked about this. And I said, I'm just gonna think about it. Thank you so much. And that was right when I met the naturopath, but about a month later, I got a letter firing me from his practice for
Yeah.
non-compliance. And I went to my car that day crying again. It's another crying moment where I was feeling the pain of all the patients that were having surgeries because they didn't know there was an alternative. I've never had any surgery on my eyes. The naturopath fixed the issue. And so I think for me, the book is about bringing back that knowing and knowing that there's a place for it where you can actually what we've done is in each chapter we've got a sovereign prescription, so it's sort of like the prescription you were never given by your doctor. So what can you do at home to try to investigate which areas need more support, and then what we also recommend what to ask your practitioner. So it's like things you can do on your own, things to ask your practitioner. And then I love tying the spiritual side to everything because it's always there. If somebody's got thyroid, they haven't used their voice. It's pretty much across the board that if you really want to heal, you have to face that spiritual side too. And so we address all that in the book.
Wow, that's a really big space.
Yeah,
Can we get into the spiritual piece?
sure.
So when you start when you start combining medicine with spiritual, I think we're breaking down some kind of imaginary barrier that's always existed. I mean, probably since the early 1900s, right? As soon as our system was created the way that it is now, we pushed all of that out of the way because they needed data and they needed to be able to use tools that they could identify and
And
put
they
their
needed cash.
and they needed cash. Yes, we can
Uh-huh.
we can talk about that. But let's talk about spiritual because I think that if we are going to heal this nation from a health perspective, you cannot ignore the spiritual piece. So what does that mean to you?
So what it means to me is that if we put our own knowledge of what's going on with our own bodies and we shove it down just to keep going, or we answer questions in the way we think the doctor wants us to, we can't really access what's going on because our body, when it's giving us symptoms, it's typically just trying to have a conversation. It's not, there's not anything more than that. It wants you to listen, and a lot of times it's repressed trauma. It could be other issues that have happened. It could be in your fascia. We now understand our fascia carries a lot of memory. So there's so many exciting things we're actually understanding now that we didn't understand even 5 years ago. And I think COVID was an actual big eye-opening of positive for everyone because many people knew there was something off, but they didn't know what to do about it. And now they're witnessing that they should have listened to their intuition. And I spend a lot of time telling people just let that go, but let's let it be a lesson for moving forward. Like, questioning is okay. That's what medicine's about, is called the practice of medicine because it evolves. Like the point is we don't understand everything. That's principle three. So if we don't understand everything, like be open that there may be more out there and ask the questions and trust your intuition, trust your body, and don't just do things. That's where I see a lot of problems in the biohacking space because you've got these people telling you what your numbers should look like. And many people feel like they've let people down or they're not enough. You get that kind of that I'm not enough, I didn't do it right kind of energy.
Yeah,
And that's not what's actually going on in their body.
that's amazing. The Gosh, how do we even begin to tackle the spiritual side for somebody? So I'll just give you some examples. Maybe this
Yeah.
will be helpful. So I think a lot of my patients tend to be sort of like 60 plus. So decades of living in the medical system that we have, the culture that we are. And let's just use somebody who has, let's say they have a religious background, just for example. Um, if someone has a religious background, they hang their hat on, from a spirituality perspective, on organized religion. How do you help them to see that there is more?
That's a great question. If they're open to it, I actually refer a lot of patients to the ancient wisdom of Kabbalah because it's prior to any religion, and it actually unites the religions, and it asks the questions about why is this in my movie? Just letting them pause and look at their own reactivity, claim it, and figure out, like, is there something in me that needs to be repaired that these lessons are coming in, whether they're physical lessons or emotional lessons. most things that happen in life are actually a gift on this process of evolution. So I try to teach patients that they're not everybody's willing to learn it. And I think the younger we can get to them, the better, just because you're right. Once they hit a certain age and they've been in a system that's shut them down for so long, the gaslighting becomes so significant that they will end up gaslighting themselves. So then their intuition is blocked really just because of them. That's the principle number 2. Like they have intuition, but it's shoved down there because of cultural conditioning, their religion. So you can just I just support and ask them to kind of come into whatever the easiest terms are. So it might be journaling or soaking in Epsom or getting out and getting the morning sun. I do that a lot where I tell people just ask the earth if we can get you back connected. We're supposed to be on this planet for a reason. So if you can ask the earth or the trees to take what's not yours and then ask the sun and the trees to bring you the light, with the space that you created by clearing the negative, like something basic like that, like getting them back into nature is always a good start.
Yeah, those are great starts. So one of my favorite, there's a lot of favorites in there. Some of my favorite um, Kabbalah principles. So you mentioned reactivity, that switch from being reactive to being proactive. I love this because I have friends from all sorts of different religious backgrounds, and it is what I love about the principles of Kabbalah is that it does unify everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim or a Christian, we still all have these same reactive natures. We're all human, and we all. If you go back just in my day today, how many times was that reactive in a Slack conversation? I can think of one right now. Talking to my family, talking like a text message or whatever, it happens all the time, and I think it doesn't matter what our religious framework is. If we are able to take a look at those and think about how we could have done that in a different way, take a breath, think about the bigger picture, be proactive in our response. Every time I do that, that feeling of the light, right? And I'm referring to the light with a capital
Yes.
L. Getting out in nature does the same thing. Some of the interviews that we've done this week have been people have been talking about these same things: forest bathing, neutralizing your immune system, not in a bad way, but like balancing it
Mhm.
out, right?
Yeah.
Um, Balancing parasympathetic, sympathetic. All of these things, which some of these we can measure, are all based off the same thing. Which brings me to this idea of like, okay, this is how we do it. The biggest negative feedback I get from my patients when I start talking about all these things is, I don't have time for that.
Mhm.
So how do you tackle that? How do you tackle the reality of our like the busy world right now? We're in Midtown Manhattan is busy,
Yes.
right? How do we help people to understand the power and the value of seeking out this type of spiritual path?
I think we talked about the device that you can wear and still exist. I think that helps just because if you can calm down the noise any which way, the spirituality can come in a little bit easier. But I would say making it simple for people. So, like, whether it's 5 minutes, that's what I always try to do 5 minutes here or there and having them have some kind of accountability. But being outside is the easiest one. So, we now are proving to tie back to mitochondria that our mitochondria are clocks. They know what time it is and they need to know what time it is. So part of why people feel so sick is because they're in these blue light controlled environments and the mitochondria don't know what they're supposed to be doing. So just getting people to get outside and then if I give them that like I need you to get outside for 5 minutes to make sure you're still going to have your metabolism going and when you're out there let's connect to the trees and the grass. Most people, it may take a little bit of time, but if you give them shorter windows where they don't have to meditate for an hour, like it's 5 minutes, is fine. Then I tend to get response, and over time, they shift, some faster than others.
Joe Dispenza might disagree with you.
Yes, they might.
An hour, at least.
And I do enjoy I've been doing his hour-long meditation since I went to the retreat. So I think that was
For how long have you been doing that?
it's been over a year. Yeah.
What time do you wake up?
30 minutes to an hour. It depends what 5:30. If I get up at 5:30, I'll try to do the hour.
Yeah.
Um, and then I do my workout later in the day. I used to do my workout in the morning, but we now know that's not the best time anyway. So it's great because these clocks like to be stressed more around 3 to 5 than they do first thing in the morning.
Right. Anything else about mitochondria we need to hit?
I think understanding that they're the canary in the coal mine. So people we're taught in biology and we're taught in med school that they're just the powerhouse of the cell, and that's so incomplete. It's kind of ridiculous. So, and in addition, the amount that we get taught about the mitochondria in med school is non-existent, right? It's just severe mitochondrial diseases that are genetic, and that's all we learn. So I think just having everybody know that you've got these brilliant, they were their own bacteria billions of years ago, that you've got these in almost every cell, just your red cells are the only one that don't have it. And so you have a sensor in every cell that is feeling its environment. So that like when we say canary in the coal mine, that's it's got this ability to see if it's a safe environment or not. So if you're stuck in your stories in your head, if you're going, like you said, Midtown Manhattan without a break and you're in blue lights and you're not touching nature, the mitochondria are going to yell out and they need to be listened to, or your function and your ability to really hit that goal that everybody wants to hit of performance is just going to be suppressed.
Yeah. If we could leave the listeners with some maybe immediate next steps, let's just maybe start with mitochondria and then we can work maybe backwards in our conversation. What would be some immediate steps that somebody could take to improve mitochondrial function?
So I love to give an analogy of the plant because this is an easy one for listeners. So the chloroplast and the mitochondria look exactly the same. And I did not know that until my daughter asked her to quiz her on biology. This is a few years ago. And she gave me this packet and it was all about the leaf. And I was like, Jordan, you said it was the mitochondria. And she's the one who looked at me and said, Mom, chloroplast and mitochondria are exactly the same. So when you're trying to figure out how to help your mitochondria, think about what your plant's like. So they need good sunlight, they're in a healthy earth, they have nice water. So and people talk to their plants and they grow better. So just think about your plant and do all those things. Get your feet in the earth, drink some structured water, expose your eyes to the sun, and speak nicely to your cells.
Whoa. Is it bad that I don't have any plants that are alive in our house right now?
I'm the same way. It's okay. It's okay.
I treat myself better than I treat our plants. No, that's really helpful. And then maybe let's go back to the intuition piece because over the last, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years in my household with, the journey that both my wife and I have been on from a medical and spiritual perspective, this conversation around intuition keeps coming up over and over again because it's hard. It's hard to separate intuition from all of the other influences that we're seeing. And you kind of laid these out, right? So people that have an agenda, your own biases. And I struggle, it's, especially when you're dealing with another person in your life. People say, well, I have to listen to my intuition. And from an outside perspective, you could say, well, that sounds a whole lot like something that this person said that you were listening to. So is that really how do you start listening to your own intuition?
Well, just to back up for a second, I think, we're so brain centered instead of heart centered. And there's a lot of research coming out just even about the amount of neurons that are in your heart and that we feel energy in a room before we even walk in. And that's actually our heart space speaking to our brain more than the other way around. And so, just like we kind of got captured in the early 1900s in med schools, we've really adapted to this brain first mentality in every aspect of life. So going with your heart is going against the grain. So I understand how people have trouble with it. I would say start in baby steps, right? So if you feel something in your heart, in your soul that just doesn't feel right or that you want to share, like just speak up where maybe you would have shoved it down before. And when you start taking those little steps, you'll notice more coming in. So I do believe the soul kind of listens. So if we start paying attention to it, it will share more. And so I think just start wherever you're comfortable. That's what I would say. And it doesn't need to be like suddenly you're following a guru and channeling, great information. Just listen to the little messages that you get instead of shoving them away.
Yeah. I think what's been helpful for me, and I think my wife would say the same thing, is being able to just stop, carve out space, time. Some people would call it a container, whatever you want, just to listen because it's so, and I'm totally guilty of this. I either have music on or I have something playing around me all the time. And I actually watch my kids follow me in this. And so like my son who travels with me on these trips, one of my sons, um, he's uncomfortable in silence. And
So many.
it's in that silence that you can hear it and you can feel it.
I love that point. So, unfortunately, I think there is a greater battle going on, and it's a more of a global kind of dark versus light. It's how I view all these different crazy things happening on the planet right now. And the agenda of the dark is to get our focus, get our time. So you've got, kids now just scrolling, including my 14-year-old, who it's almost impossible to get it off of him. But they're scrolling the shorts and they're just distracted by anything and they're not able to sit in silence. And that's what I believe some kind of body wants to happen, right? They want everybody fighting. They're replacing ice cream shops with vape stores. Like these are all things that separate you from your intuition.
Right.
So being a conscious one to spend that time just to try it out. And that's something we have mentioned in the book about spiritual sovereignty and hormesis, both mental and spiritual hormesis, where we're actually challenging ourselves to silence and we're challenging ourselves to being in uncomfortable positions. Like these are necessary things to bring the needle back, like to get us back to humanity and community and all the things we need to be doing.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time. So I just have one more question.
Go for it.
And I end the podcast with this every time.
Okay.
So if you and I were creating the future of healthcare, which we call the Health 3.0 model, if you and I were creating that and I gave you the keys to the kingdom, unlimited resources, you can do whatever you want, but you get to do one thing that's going to have the biggest impact, what would it be?
I think it would be so if we're talking about having providers actually address this disconnect that people are ignoring with their bodies. So just hearing it where the practitioners are on board instead of being part of the problem, where they can say, "Hey, I need you to get outside," or "I need you to take time," and listen, and then bring in what comes up to you, and then they don't gaslight the patient. Instead, they work with the patient. That would probably be what I would add.
I'm not going to ask you how you would do that. We'll just leave it at that. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for having me.